So, after the affair, did you find that the two of you could just not get enough of each other? You were having this wild, super, ultra strong craving for each other? If so, that's common, and it is called hysterical bonding. So, hysterical bonding is not the same thing as trauma bonding, and I think we should talk about the differences. So, both of them do involve trauma, and both of them do increase closeness in a way, but they're quite different, and let's go through kind of the differences between each. Hysterical bonding, for the most part, affects two people who are in a relationship, and after a trauma, those two people have this intense and heightened physical and emotional craving and connection for each other. Now, usually this is temporary, and as I said, it's in response to kind of a specific threatening event, usually. So, infidelity, for example. The resulting threat to the relationship makes them both really crave closeness and reassurance and reconnection. So that's why there's this sort of frenzied reconnecting after someone has experienced a trauma. That is all hysterical bonding. The name isn't particularly great, and it's not that important to actually call it that. It's just a known phenomenon. Now, trauma bonding is a little bit different. Trauma bonding is when two people are attracted to each other because they have experienced similar but different traumas, right? They didn't necessarily share that trauma together at the same time. They might have had that trauma in their past history. So, for example, if two people grew up in abusive homes, they are likely to find each other and bond over the fact that they grew up in an abusive environment. Now, if you were, to kind of explain this, if you were raised in a home that was neglectful or abusive and you survived that by fawning, remember, fawning is one of the trauma responses where you basically act like a super helper, you fawn over the abuser, you try to do everything and anything you can to make them feel comfortable so that they will not do things to hurt you or neglect you. Fawning, yeah? If you grew up in that environment, you're likely to seek out a relationship when you grow up where you can also be a fawn because you know how to do that. Your brain recognizes that as familiar. And to our brains, things that are familiar often seem safe, even though they aren't. So it's important to note that trauma bonding is a spectrum. And I wouldn't say that all trauma bonding is bad. I would say that it's something to think about. Because this behavior exists on a spectrum, some of it is minimally impactful, some of it is hugely impactful. And many relationships where there is trauma bonding have cycles of abuse dynamics. So there's, a honeymoon phase, there's an eruption phase, there's a kind of a love bombing phase. So read more about trauma bonding and the cycle of abuse if you're curious about this. And this dynamic tends to last a lot longer than hysterical bonding. Hysterical bonding tends to be shorter. Trauma bonding can last a lifetime. Now, a third additional type, which doesn't have a specific name, at least not that I'm aware of, is that two people can go through a shared trauma, like two soldiers who are in a war, and be very healthfully bonded as a result of that. Going through a shared traumatic experience can create a really deep emotional connection between people that isn't unhealthy. So we shouldn't assume that every trauma leads to unhealthy responses. It's just something for us to think about, look about, talk about, and see if that's a factor for the two of you in your relationship. Okay, tell me what you think about this. Let's talk about it.